molecular structures and functions of genes. Molecular behavioral genetics. How structure/function of genes interact. W. Environment and behavior. Epigenetics. Environmental influences on gene expression. W/0 DNA change. Epi. In addition or above how lifestyle choices and environment interact. W. Genome influence on gene depression beginning in the womb. Life experiences lay down epigenetic marks. Methyl-molecules affect the expression of any gene in DNA. Segment affected. Effects of childhood trauma, poverty, malnutrition can last a lifetime. Health and well-being can be affected by stress from family members. Researchers question why only one member of twins develop genetically. Influence, mental disorder, natural selection, and behavior. Darwin's principles of natural selection guides evolutionary psychologists in understanding what makes humans alike. Natural selection, a principle inherited on organism to survive and reproduce in a particular environment, will most likely be passed through generations. Mutation, random error, and gene replication that leads to change. Darwin's basic principles. Organisms' varied offspring compete for survival. Certain biological and behavioral variations increase an organism's survival. Changes in their particular environment. Offspring that survive are more likely to pass their genes to the next generation. Over time, populations' characteristics may change. Psychological traits can be bred as well as psychical traits. Naturally occurring selection. Historical genes give great capacity to learn and adapt to life in varied environments. Genes and experience together wire the brain. Adaptive flexibility in responding to different environments contributes to our fitness and our ability to survive and reproduce. Male vs. female. Males more likely to initiate sexual activity. Perceive women's friendliness as sexual interest. Females' tendency toward tall men. W. Slim waists and broad shoulders. Men who are mature, dominant, and bold. Social scripts. Culturally modeled guide for how to act in various situations. How men and women of different ages act in a society. Who we are is not hardwired. Some traits and behaviors are hard to explain in terms of natural selection. Biopsychosocial approach. Genes, environment, and cultural influence on development. Unit 3. Sensation. Sensation. Sensory receptors and nervous system receive stimuli from our environment. Nose, eyes, sensory organs. Perception, organizing and interpreting sensory information. Recognize meaningful objects and events. Processing stimuli. Top-down experience. Higher-level processing. We see what we expect. Bottom-up sensory input. Brain attempts to make sense. Selective attention. Following one stimuli among others. We are surrounded by sights, smells, tastes, but pay attention to few at a time. Cocktail party effect. Phones and driving. 37% decrease in brain activity in vital areas. 4x risky inattentional blindness. Failing to see visual objects when attention is focused somewhere else. Change blindness. Failing to notice changes in visual environments. Sensation. Receive right arrow. Transform right arrow. Deliver transduction. Conversion of one form to another. Neural impulses. Our brain can interpret psychophysics. Study of relationships between physical characteristics of stimuli. Intensity or experience. Absolute threshold. Minimum stimulation to detect a particular stimulus. 50% of time difference. Threshold. Minimum difference between two stimuli required for detection. 50% J&D. Just noticeable difference. J&D must be constant. Signal detection theory. How and when we detect the presence of a faint stimulus among background stimulus. 2 conditions. Strength. Psychological state. Weber's law. The ability to tell difference between degrees/intensity between different degrees of stimuli. Weber and J&D. Subliminal stimuli. Not detectable 50% of the time. Below absolute threshold. May not notice if weak, but your brain might. Priming activation. Often unconscious. Predisposing perception. Memory response. You might not notice, but your brain might. Sensory adaptation. Diminished sensitivity to stimuli of constant stimulation. Habituation. Diminishes behavior due to constant stimulation. Ignoring unthreatening stimuli leaves us free to focus on changing stimuli. Sense receptors. Alert to novelty. New stimuli. New situations needs to be evaluated and assessed for danger. Functional. Adaptive parapsychology. Paranormal phenomenon. Extrasensory perception. Controversial claim that awareness can occur apart from sensory input. Telepathy. Clairvoyance. Precognition. The eye. Perceptual set. Mental predisposition to perceive one thing, not another. Frequency. Wavelength. Right arrow. Hue/color. Amplitude. Height. Right arrow. Brightness. Cornea. Clear outer layer protecting the pupil/iris. Pupil. Adjustable opening. Light enters iris. String of tissue and color around the pupil. Controls size. Muscle control. Lens. Transparent structure behind pupil. Changes shape to focus image by light. Retina. Light sensitive inner surface in the back of the eye. Rods/cones. Light waves transduced into neural impulses by rods and cones, then passed through bipolar and ganglion cells. Layers of neurons begin visualizing. Nearsighted. Myopia/farsighted. Hyperopia. Accommodation. Focus rods. Peripheral vision when cones don't respond. Nighttime. Fovea/cones/receptors. Retinal photoreceptors concentrated near center of retina and function in daylight. Fine detail. Color. Optic nerve. Axons of ganglion. Neural impulses leave through the back of the eye and are carried from eye to brain. Blind spot. Optic disc point where optic nerve leaves eye. Receptors. After neural impulses exits eye, optic nerve carries impulse to thalamus on visual cortex of occipital lobes. Visual pathway and optic chiasm. Where optic nerves cross. Hubel and Wiesel. Nobel Prize 1981 mapped visual cortex and identified specialized cells that react to selective stimulation. Featured detectors. Specialized cells that react to selective stimulation. Visual process. Cornea. Right arrow. Pupil. Right arrow. Iris. Right arrow. Lens. Focuses light. Right arrow sent to the back of the eye. Lens curves. Lip image. Accommodated light hits retina. Fovea/cones. Transduction occurs using rods/cones. Bipolar cells and ganglion cells. Neural impulses are sent through brain's optic chiasm. Crossing thalamus reaching occipital lobes. Left eye. Right arrow. Right lobe. Right eye. Right arrow. Left lobe. Color. Young-Helmholtz trichromatic. 3-color theory. Retina contains 3 types of color. Receptors. Cones/fovea. 1 sensitive to red. 1 to green. 1 to blue. Combo. Right arrow. Perception of any color. Colorblind. 1 in 50. Lack functioning cones. Not blind to all colors. Sex linked. Primarily males. Monochromatic. 1 color. Dichromatic. 2 colors. Pair and opponent process theory. Cone receptors paired together enable color vision. Cones responses are processed by opponent processing cells. Red, green, blue, yellow, white, black. Activation of one color activates another. Cells stimulate other cells. Feature detectors. Nerve cells in visual cortex of occipital lobe respond to edges, angles, movements, information received from individual ganglion cells in retina and pass to cortical areas. Superclusters respond to complex patterns, parallel processing many visual aspects processed simultaneously. Motion, form, color. Brain integrates subdimensions into perceived images. Perceived images. Facial recognition. Brain processes projection on retina and compares with information 1 2 faces in 100. Seeing. Right arrow. Retinal processing. Right arrow. Feature detection. Right arrow. Parallel processing. Right arrow. Right arrow recognition. Gestalt. Early 20th century German psychologists noticed a cluster of sensations lead to Gestalt, German for form whole. Perception. Whole exceeds some. Brain does more than simply register, filter incoming and construct perceptions. Parallel processing. Mind brings order to form stimuli by following certain rules for grouping. Laws of grouping. Figure. Ground. Organization of visual field into figures. Objects that stand out from ground to surroundings. Contrast. Proximity. Nearby figures grouped together. Continuity. Smooth. Continuous patterns. Closure. Gaps filled in to create a whole object. Depth perception. Ability to see objects in 3 dimensions. Images that strike retina are in 2 dimension and allow us to see distance. Binocular cues. Depth cues. Retinal disparity and convergence. Still to both eyes. Retinal disparity. Comparison of retinal images from both eyes. Brain computes. Difference. Greater disparity. Closer object. Convergence. Inward angle of eyes focusing on nearby object. Monocular eyes. Gauge far distances. Relative height. Objects higher in our field of vision are seen are farther away. Relative size. 2 objects similar in size tilt to smaller retinal image. Size seen as far away. The interposition. When an object blocks another, it's perceived as closer. Relative motion. As we move, so do stable objects. Fixation point in front. Object is moving back even though we are moving forward. Car. Further fixation point. Faster movement. Linear perspective. Parallel lines meet in the distance. A light and shadow shading produces depth consistent with assumption that light comes from above. Texture gradient. Texture vanishes as things are farther away. Stroboscopic movement. Rapid series of slightly varying images as continuous movement. Motion constructed in heads. 5 phenomenon. Bouncing lights are perceived as moving. Perceptual constancy. Top-down processing recognizes objects without being deceived by changes in color, brightness, and size. Identifies objects. Color constancy. Object is brightness even if color varies. Brightness constancy. Object is brightness even if light varies. Shape constancy. Unchanging shape. Size constancy. Unchanging size. Relative luminance. The amount of light an object reflects relative to its surroundings. Ear. Audition. Sense / active hearing. Pressure. Waves. Right arrow. Sound. Right arrow. Air molecules bump creating waves. Sound waves. Vibrations. Frequency and wavelengths. Tilde. Pitch. Amplitude. Loudness. Outer middle. Intersections. Transduction of ear. Sound. Right arrow. Accessory structures. Right arrow. Sense receptors. Right arrow. Vibrating air. Tilde. Nerve impulses. Brain then decodes sounds. Cochlea. The inner ear. Sound waves. Right arrow. Cochlear fluid moves. Bummy fluid filled tube. Oval window opening to cochlea covered by tympanic membrane. Vibrates when receives sound waves. Right arrow. Cochlea ossicles. 3 small bones. Sound wave. Right arrow. Tympanic membrane. Right arrow. Oval window. Sound vibration. Right arrow. Oval window ripples. Cochlea and basilar membrane where hair cells. Cilia move. Right arrow. Trigger nerve impulse. Axons. Right arrow. Auditory nerve. Right arrow. Auditory cortex. Passes through thalamus. Auditory nerve sends neural messages to thalamus. Right arrow. Auditory cortex and brains. Temporal lobes. 2 types of hearing loss. Sensory neural damage to cilia cell receptors or auditory nerve tilde trouble. Hearing conduction damage. Middle ear bones or eardrum. Headphones. Sound waves. Right arrow. Auditory canal. Bombard. Basilar membrane. No outlet. Cochlear implant. Sounds. Right arrow. Electrical signals. Stimulates auditory nerve through electrodes. Right arrow. Cochlea. Sounds. Right arrow. Electrical signals. Right arrow. Brain. Allowed. Right arrow. Multiple signals. Piece theory. Different pitches because different sound waves triggers different spots in cochlea's basilar membrane tilde certain areas generate neural signals. Right arrow. Brain determines sounds. Pitch frequency / temporal theory. Sense low pitches. Brain needs pitch by monitoring frequency neural impulses that travel up auditory nerve. Basilar membrane vibrates because sound waves triggers neural impulses and brain combined frequency of 100 waves / second. 100 pulses / second. Travel up auditory nerve. Pauli principle. Rapid succession tilde neurons achieve combined above 100 waves / second. Sound and touch. Sense of touch. 4 skin senses. Pressure, warmth, cold, pain. Somatosensory receives sensory information from skin / other senses. 2 threshold. Blood vessels, bone, tissue. Right arrow. Barriers connects external world through information on temperature. Pressure. Pain. To operate safely, pain bottom up and top down. Biopsychosocial effect. Biological pain. Sensory receptors. Mouse eyes mostly in skin muscles. Organs detect hurtful temperatures. Pressure. Chemical. Pain circuit. Mouse receptors respond to potentially damaging stimuli. Tilde descending impulse. Right arrow. Spinal cord. Right arrow. Neural message. Right arrow. Brain tilde interrupts signal as pain. Gate control theory. Spinal cord has neurological gate blocks / allows pain signals to brain opened by pain signals. Right arrow. Small nerve fibers closed by activity in larger fibers. Message or information in brain with distracting thoughts. Acupuncture. Stimulation produced by analgesia. Inability to feel pain. Needles stimulate nerve fibers. Analgesia closes pain gates. Psychological pain impacted by attention. Distracted. Right arrow. Less pain. Memories of pain can change. Peak and sociocultural. More pain when others are in pain. Cultural expectations. Body's sense of movement. Kinesthetic. Sense of position / movement. Detectors in muscles, tendons, joints. Vestibular sacs. Fluid-filled semicircular canals with 2 calcium-filled vestibular sacs in ears. Head and body movements. Chemical senses. Taste degustation. 200+ taste buds. Pore catches food. Chemicals transduced to neural messages. Sent to brain. 50-60 taste receptors. Project hairs to sense food molecules. Smell olfactory molecule. Right arrow. Nasal cavity. 20 million receptors respond selectively. Axon fibers alert brain through axon fibers. Receptors. Right arrow. Olfactory and brain. Right arrow. Temporal lobes. Primary smell. Cortex. Limbic system. Memory. Emotion. No thalamus. 5 basic tastes. Sweet. Energy source. Salty. Sodium. Sour. Toxic acid. Bitter. Poison. Umami. Proteins. Grow / rep. Air. Tissue. Senses. impact one another. Taste bud info right arrow area between frontal and temporal lobes. Chewing registers area in brain that receives